Welcome back to the Electrify podcast, brought to you by the creators of Electrify Expo, North America's largest EV festival, coming to a major city near you. We are live on X and we are live in full effect. We are live more ways than one because we are electrifying the way we move. Matt Teskey joined us once again and joined with some representatives of Electrification Coalition. I mean, that sounds like an amazing rap name, Electrification Coalition. Right, I think it's our new rap group. That's how we're gonna start things.
Wu-Tang's shaking right now.
Yeah, exactly. Wu-Tang's for the kids, but Electrification Coalition's for the babies, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about our future here. You like that? Emily and Torin joining us here. We just met, and we bring in Matt when we get to this level of knowledge and mind share. And I'm this big dumb animal that comes in as like, educate me, but Matt's like this learned scholar, and he has many leather-bound books. But he has a perspective that I think that an early adopter has. I'm a not adopter. So prove me wrong or prove me right. I want to just be proven that electrification is the way to go. But on that rant, Torin, Emily, go ahead. Let's see an arm wrestling match to see who goes first. Join us.
I'll jump in over here, coming from the West Coast. I'm in Palo Alto, California. But my name is Emily Pape. I'm a senior associate with the Electrification Coalition. And I predominantly work on our programs team, working on workplace charging, also with cities on their fleet electrification, and kind of just, EVs all the time. Over to you, Torin.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, Torin Spencer, senior associate with the Electrification Coalition as well. Working on workplace charging and adoption. Been working on fleet electrification in the past as well, and located in Orlando, Florida. So we got all the coast covered.
That's perfect. Matt, and this is, again, all joking aside, I try to make it fun and digestible in regards to education. And obviously the infrastructure is something that we always talk about. And this is what, ChargeWay is about. This is what Electrification Coalition is about. You're fighting the good fight. And I think that is, again, we only have one planet. So this perspective and education, and also, like you said, this coalition to create this infrastructure. But Matt, I'm sure you have a bevy of questions. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I had a chance to chat with folks from the Electrification Coalition a lot of different times over the years, people that have come and gone. And again, the efforts that are being made there have been longstanding. I think that what really, in my experience, and again, Emily and Torin, you can obviously correct me here, but the Electrification Coalition, oftentimes, and there's a lot of behind the scenes work that has to happen to make things happen in the electrification space. And that really oftentimes in the past has started, from the policy side, and really what conversations can we have to really set the stage for how electrification can impact different parts of our lives. And again, you mentioned workplace charging, and obviously that's directly related to, personal EV ownership and how that relates to your options for filling up with an electric car. But Torin, as you mentioned, there's also fleets involved. So I guess one thing to help people understand and maybe unpack a little bit is kind of at a very high level, where is EC really impacting things today? I think those who are early adopters, those who've been around the industry for a long time, we could probably go on and on and on about the efforts made and the successes over the years from Electrification Coalition. But today, where do things stand? Where do you see the landscape as it stands today for all the things that Electrification Coalition is a part of?
The horizon is bright. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background, like you said. Electrification Coalition, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based in DC, working to move transportation technology away from oil dependency. But there's a lot of stuff going on. Our team works on policy, campaigns, programs. We also work towards port electrification, freight electrification, multimodal transportation, the lot, trying to attack it from all sorts of different directions.
Emily, did that cover it, or is there
just
there
about? We really work with, all sorts of public and private entities and stakeholders to just implement these EV acceleration programs. And so right now, that's really looking like kind of serving as the bridge on the programs team from all this money that's coming in at the federal level, and then making sure that money translates into tires on the road, and that you're seeing EVs, in your cities, in your school districts. Getting electric buses on the roads, getting your fleet vehicles that you see Parks and Rec in your city, that those are EVs. So kind of trying to serve as that bridge in that space right now.
Yeah, and you took the words out of my mouth, because there are dollars being spent, but where is it being spent? How is it being allocated, right? So you're, as I say, you're fighting this good fight of, it's not going to, and you guys know it's not going to be like a switch. And you've seen it over the last, I mean, how many decades, right? Of here's the death of the EV car. Now, again, it bears repeating this infrastructure. So you guys are really aggressive on all your fronts, like you said, fleets and buses. We've had some amazing guests on here, both in person or Electrify Expo and here on the podcast. And Matt really dives into it. Let me just ask you this, because I've had a lot of international people on here talking about the infrastructure. What country do you admire who has the best infrastructure of EV? Maybe you might not have an answer because it just, and also where are we in the rung of kind of infrastructure of charging and being kind of progressive like this?
That's a great question, Jarod. As far as infrastructure, there's probably a lot of good examples, but I think Norway is kind of leading the way in a lot of ways. A vast majority of their new vehicles that are sold are electric. So that means there's a lot of charging available as well. Obviously, there's a lot of things behind the scenes in Norway as well. There's a lot of incentives to move electric vehicles, but they realize that they can't be dependent on oil forever as well. So they're moving that way. I think if Norway can do it, I think the United States can do it as well.
And
it's a very loaded question. Sorry, I apologize, but it's just because I'm always like, when you talk to a musician, like, who are your inspiration? And where did you get that from? So I think that's I don't know, like I said, big dumb animal questions.
But like we said earlier, it's Wu-Tang. So I mean,
Go ahead, Emily. Sorry.
I would also add in, like, Norway's doing some really cool stuff. But I personally have been really impressed with all of the investment we've seen lately from our own federal government. And so while, 6 months ago, you might not walk around and see EV chargers everywhere, that's changed. Like in the last 6 months, over 1,000 public chargers have come online in the US. And so I think that's been really impressive and really shows where we're trending in the US when it comes to federal investment, for public charging, but also for multifamily housing charging. And then also something that Torin and I are both really excited to talk about, workplace charging as well.
One of the things that, to Jarod's question is like, who's done it right? I think let's just kind of, open up a little bit of, the elephant in the room right now. I think for some conversation that's been public for the last month or two is there hasn't exactly been a lot of great headlines for EVs in the last, 30 to 60 days. And a lot of that, is pointing to one of the things that you mentioned, from the Electrification Coalition, Torin, is like, it's like, we're nonpartisan here. Like, we want to work with everybody and anybody we can. But there appears to be a divide in how we can actually translate the value of electrification to different lifestyles, to different places geographically. What do you see as the biggest hurdle as to how we can basically bridge that chasm with regard to how are we going to get more people to understand the value of what we're doing? We can spend money all day long, but if people aren't seeing personal value in their lives in it, or it's not translating to who they are as a driver or as a business owner, we can spend money till we're blue in the face. They have to believe. So how do we help them believe?
That's a great question. Education. That's the biggest part. People are afraid of things they don't fully understand, and that makes perfect sense. People are moving from gas-powered cars they've driven for a long time, and EVs are a new technology. They just have information they need in order to make sense for them. But EVs are super effective, have the range for most people's regular daily commutes. And the more chargers we put in the ground, the more useful those EVs will become for everybody.
And do you think, with all the manufacturers coming out, just at CES talking about VinFast and this manufacturer, that manufacturer, there's not enough chargers going around, or are there? And like what like you said in the last 1,000 or last 30, 60 days, like you said, this chasm of EVs and the separation, but the charging and the infrastructure, Emily, as you said, what's your take on that? Basically, like flooding the world with vehicles, or flooding the states with vehicles and not having that infrastructure. What's the answer? And then also part two to that is, aren't a lot of, and we've talked about this, Matt, before with other guests, is the oil companies are making investments in that charging experience as well, right? I mean, aren't they getting funding as well? So they're kind of, it's helping everybody. You're like, all right, let's join the party.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I really want to hear your thoughts on this, but I mean, to that point is there's a lot of fever pitch happening right now in the world of electrification, good and bad. But with all those investments being made and all the people that are coming to the table, I think to Jared's point too is there are non-traditional players that are stepping up and saying, "Hey, we want to be involved now." How do you see that playing out over time as it relates to traditional fossil fuel brands getting involved? In my opinion, they don't make the electricity, so this is more of a brand and a landscape play. But how do you see it, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're obviously in this transition of how you fill up your car, and for a little while, like people are going to be comforted to like fill up at a Shell station, whether that Shell is gas or electric. But I think we're really seeing, if you're concerned about issues of infrastructure, this will become you are able to fill up your vehicle at a variety of different places. So like right now, you don't go to work and like use your work gas station. That's not a thing.
Right.
But that will be, and already is starting to be, something that is just part of people's daily lives. And it is becoming something that employers will expect, or employees when they're searching for a new job or like a transfer, to say, okay, well, I can get some charge at home, but my employer provides this really nice level 2 charging. My car's going to sit for 8 hours. And so that will be the bulk of the charging for a lot of people. And while these DC fast chargers are important when we're talking about like the Great American Road Trip, right? But most of us aren't driving the Great American Road Trip every day. And so, workplace charging, home charging is going to fill a lot of Americans' needs when it comes to this.
The word you just used there a few different times, like basically the fill up and going to fueling stations. And this is something that I work on a regular basis, is talking about what is the product that we're actually trying to get people to buy into. And if we're asking them to fill up with electricity, that's a big part of the psychological switch, right? But it's not the same as taking a liquid and pouring it into an empty tank. There's a lot of complexity and engineering going on there that actually can impact your experience as a driver, whether you're a fleet driver or, and most importantly, for the private citizen to understand like how that works. And to your point, we may not be making road trips every day. It's most people don't, but that's the thing that I think that we need to figure out how to bridge that educational gap that like Torin mentioned, like it's about education. And so if most people think that they can get in a gas car today and just drive wherever they want, even though they probably never do, that hurdle of educating them on that with plugging in and charging at these options, how do you see how we can unpack that for people? Because there's a lot to learn there. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that.
That's a good question. Yeah, there is a lot to learn. There's a lot to unpack with daily use of vehicles. People's regular trips are less than 100 miles round trip a day. EVs cover that easily. Most new electric vehicles have ranges of around 250 miles. If you use it wisely, you can get from A to B super easy. Yeah, the road trip is a little bit more complex, but the more chargers that go in along highways and then at workplaces as well can really bridge that gap and kind of become the new gas station model. There are gas stations here, there, and everywhere, and everybody's used to being able to go anywhere, fill up whenever, and they're good to go. Eventually, when we have more stations put in the ground, that will have a similar effect and a similar feel, with stations here, there, and everywhere to charge whenever you need to.
On that end, having them there, I agree 100%. They got to be there. They got to be working. We hear about that a lot, about, reliability and maintenance. There's also that element of understanding how the fill up works, right? Is because consumers are used to just saying, I got to take the E and make it go to F on my little gauge. Like, that's what I want to do. And we already hear stories right now about people that are plugged in at a fast charger and their battery's at 82%, and they just hang out there for the next 40 minutes to get all the way to 100, baby.
Right.
Like, there's clearly some elements about how the engineering works that is not translating to how people understand the fill up. So even if we have all those chargers out there that they can pull up and rely on, there's also that way to help them understand, like, your car may have a certain threshold of power it can accept. Your charging curve may be a certain way that you don't need to be using a fast charger right now. How do you see that we're going to resolve that? Especially if the product they've used forever is called regular and it's a liquid.
True. I think that comes with regular use. It comes with experience. Maybe new EV drivers aren't going to get that right off the bat, but they're going to eventually understand. They're going to hear eventually that keeping your battery between 15, 20%, and 80% is the sweet spot. Going from 80 to 100 isn't easy, and going below 20 isn't great for the battery all the time. So they'll learn that going between low and high is where they want to be.
So I'd ask
I
you
think
about
that'll
that.
happen.
I'd ask you, I saw a post the other day where someone did the math, like you just said, and said, well, if I can't really take it below 20% for some reason, I really can't go above 80% because fast charging isn't really efficient there. They did the math on it and said, well, I just lost 40% of my car's range. And the EPA says it's got 300. But that means I actually only have like 175 or 180. And that was an average person saying, I just did that math. So that scares me, because then it says there's all these little check boxes they have to learn about how to use it that make them just kind of see how it's depleted on their functional use. Is there a better way that we can translate that to people, as opposed to saying, make these concessions here, 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 and here? Or how do we do them a favor by helping them not feel like they're losing out, but instead show them that it's, from a lot, as you mentioned, like they have to learn this, but this conversation right here, I think there's a lot of folks. I mean, Electrify Expo, we hear these conversations. We have these conversations on the podcast a lot. I think for early adopters that worked, but I don't think that's going to work for the mainstream consumer to hear that. And dealers are saying the same thing, unfortunately.
I would also say, though, that we have to give like the average American consumer some credit. Like almost every American today owns like a smartphone and a laptop, mm-hmm. and like we understand how those batteries work. And I know just from using my iPhone that it's not a linear decrease in my battery when I use it. And so like, if I get it to 80%, yeah, it's going to take a lot longer to go from like 80 to 100 than it did 60 to 80. But I just know how to use my phone that way. And so I think that one thing that we focus on a lot in outreach and at the Electrification Coalition is ride and drives, because we've seen, and countless other nonprofits, governments, whoever you want to say, have seen that when you get people in an EV, they get really excited and see like, sure, it's fun to drive, it's intuitive to drive, like it just makes sense.
It's a car.
Right. It's a bit, right. I think that's a thing too. And so just getting people in these vehicles and giving them some credit of like, we as a society, like we are familiar with batteries. And so while that will be,
are we though? Like, are we?
I think so. And so like,
That's
there will be
today.
something.
I like this.
I am spicy today because I got to be honest.
Back us up here, man.
Yeah, I just, I think I'm an early adopter. I've been driving EVs for 10 years, and I had the same response all the time. Like, no, people get this stuff. Like, this is not going to be hard. It's been 10 years. And every time I have conversations with people that aren't like me or like us, that are, kind of in the know a bit, the amount of times I hear people say like, I don't get it. Like, I don't know what my battery does in my phone. I just plug it in. I want it to go to 100. And I'm like, well, yeah, but it's got like some, some elements to it. Like Apple's got that little notification. It's like, hey, we're kind of halting your charging for now. We're gonna make it more efficient. And they're like, yeah, I don't like that. Like, I plug it back in and I want it to go to 100. And I'm just like, oh boy, that's crazy.
It's such conditioning. I mean, look at our Brady Bunch heads here, right? Like, you got Orlando, Pacific Northwest, Northern California. I'm in Southern California. Obviously we have 3 that are on the West Coast, but I mean, obviously Emily and I being in Northern and Southern California could be 3 different states. And I say that from state of mind, not even, actual geographical location, but, being in Orlando, the infrastructure there, it's pretty decent, but you got to drive a little farther. Palo Alto takes you an hour to go 5 miles. So it's just this whole conditioning level. And Emily, you've been kind of in my head the whole time talking about ride sharing and what's going on here. And you guys, we're talking about the challenges. Let's talk about the successes and things that Electrification Coalition has done, because I don't want to act like the sky is falling, because it rained really heavy in Southern California. My pool is overflowing, first world issues. But let's talk about the wins that you guys have created, because I'm seeing, and Torin, you talked about this, talking about, basically heavy duty vehicles. That's a huge one. You talk about going cross country, these Great American Road Trips, Emily. But what are the big wins that you guys are excited about in 2023? And then even most recently, we're already a month into 2024.
Yeah, we've had a lot of big wins recently. There's been a lot of national electric vehicle infrastructure funds being distributed all across the states. There's a lot of really big stations going in along highway corridors. In Orlando, there's been a charging hub that went in downtown that was implemented by Orlando Utilities Commission. That was a big win for the city. There's a lot of other examples like that going on around the country. And then on the Electrification Coalition side, we're really excited to get EV adoption leadership programming up and going end of 23 and all the way through 24.
Emily, how about you? Anything else you want to add to that? That kind of is on the tip of your tongue, because everybody has their different agenda, right? Like why Matt drives an EV? Because he wants to look super cool. He doesn't care about the planet. I'm joking.
I was gonna say,
But
wow, that hit me in my soul.
no, but everybody has kind of, again, their lane that they're passionate about, either for their kids, for themselves, for whatever. But Emily, anything that kind of strikes your nerve?
Yeah, one thing I do want to touch on. So I live in California, but I'm originally from Idaho, so not coastal.
Woo-hoo,
And
Idaho.
yeah, and I've been doing a lot of work recently in Ohio with Ohio communities, and you are really seeing this commitment to electrification and really understanding of electric vehicles as the future, as what's here. And that's been really exciting to see when it comes to cities who are invested in the future of their communities from, yes, a climate standpoint, but also from a clean air standpoint, from a job standpoint. And so you can really see all the different facets of vehicle electrification, not just on the coast, but like all throughout the country. And so that's been really exciting. And Torin just mentioned the eval program that we're working on, so electric vehicle adoption leadership. And our focus there is in the Southeast and the Midwest in getting workplace charging in the ground, recognizing organizations that already have invested in this, because we are seeing it that companies and cities and universities want to provide this for their employees and see that this really is going to be very important in like employee retention and the vision of their business in the years in now and the years to come.
You just hit on a good point. What do companies look like in the eyes of the public as it relates to some of the things? On one hand, it's electrification, it's clean energy, it's cleaner air, etc. But then on the other hand, it's how are they setting the stage so that they're going to be relevant in years to come as it relates to their mission and their vision and how they relate to some of these opportunities, especially if it's workforce development or creating jobs and things like that. And it's interesting that so many of the opportunities that have happened for new factories, for whether it's battery or manufacturing for vehicles, so much of that has happened in states that are not, you'd think, the EV state. It wasn't exactly happening in California or New York for that matter. We see it spread out through the Midwest and the South. Is that something that, from what you just described, is that something that you think is going to continue to support the efforts that you're making as a way to point to saying, look, we're not here out of nowhere. Your state is involved with these efforts. I guess, how do you see that translating, not from just even NEVI dollars and federal dollars, but just even opportunity for private sector and some of these companies saying, well, because we got some support, we're going to go to South Carolina, like Redwood Materials building their new battery recycling factory. How is that going to continue to help, I think, bridge that gap for people to see how this is something that benefits their life, maybe as a job?
Definitely. I think we're seeing like electric vehicles being made here in the US and companies being based here in the US that in the next couple of years, like it's already starting to feel this way, but will continue to, of like American EVs are homegrown. They create good jobs. They're in communities across the country. Like you see Rivian in Illinois and Georgia, and really putting in effort to have roots across the country because this is where customers are. This is where employees are. And like we have a lot of expertise and willingness and hardworking American employees who are excited to be part of this transition.
Yeah.
And so I like to see companies investing in that, because if someone's going to work at the Rivian plant in Normal, Illinois, then EVs become part of their life. And whether or not they drive like a Chevy Bolt or a Rivian truck, whatever it looks like, they're driving something that they are a part of. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really exciting, just again, throughout the country, not just the coast.
They take pride in that. I mean, that's
exactly.
It's interesting how that conversation has kind of gotten lost over time, in the sense that, like, Tesla being a very American brand in so many ways, and that just gets overlooked by some folks. They're just kind of like, it's Tesla. But we also even hear people say, like, is it made in America? I heard it was made in China or something. And to that point too, there's a lot of Chinese brands that are making very compelling EVs that aren't here yet. From your perspective, how do you feel that we can compete with that domestically? I mean, we see a lot of things happening on the the side of the conversation for what's happening with Ford and GM and others. We're seeing a little bit of pullback from there. We're hearing that GM saying, we're going to go back to plug-in hybrids a bit. We need to reframe how we're going to do things a bit with our electrification plans. Do you think that there needs to be some sort of infusion of innovation and urgency around that, because a lot of these brands that are global, they are further ahead. How do you think we're going to compete with that as a country?
I think we're already competing. There's a lot of really big companies in the States that have already made really good EVs. Like Ford, for example, they're super interested in it. They've already made the Lightning. Uh, Von Gittin Jr. just made that brand new F-150 Lightning custom truck to show how innovative EVs can be. And they can do everything from A to Z. Ford, Chevy, the lot, they're all making really good cars, and they'll continue to do so. They may not be doing it at the rate we would love to see for the time being, but in the future, they'll continue to come out with good cars that'll compete on the world stage for sure.
Yeah, and Matt, to that point, internationally, talking to previous guests, the and it kind of playing off what you said, fueling up, this actual liquid or this thing, the way that we're charging. Couple things here. My mind's just racing. There was a way that you can charge over in Asia. You replace the batteries and you have different battery. That is a whole another way of charging. That segues into, like you said, this stigma, this conditioning of filling up. And this is our experience. And you guys keep talking about charging at work, just all of these things that are just, what are you doing for me? Right. That's kind of what no, I'm not saying me, Jarod. I'm saying metaphorically, like, what are you doing?
You guys have to
for me?
send him a car, apparently. That's the problem here.
No, but that's what they're saying. That's consumers' angle is like, what are you doing for me? Like how are you building a structure? And then that segues into, are you happy that the charging situation has been narrowed down to be one universal plug? Again, we don't need lightning cables. We don't need this. We're finally at USB-C. Can we just land on that? But that being said, about the charging scenario, that's got to help streamline something, right? Or do you feel it's a monopoly? That dang Elon.
I don't think it's a monopoly. I think we've been going through a couple different technologies, and we're gonna have adapters for a while. We're gonna have 1772 CCS adapters to go to NACS charging. It's gonna work. Things are gonna change in the next couple of years, but I think it's gonna make sense to everybody as we slowly and effectively move towards one technology.
And we're all
Go
just
ahead,
nodding.
Matt.
We're all just nodding our heads, like, yes, it sounds good.
No, I'm as I'm sitting here talking to you guys, I'm going through all the resources that Electrification Coalition has, and it's a diatribe of great numbers. And this is, let's just call it what it is. Nerdy is not a slanderous word anymore. Nerdy is, you find something to the umpty-ninth detail, and you could really dive into it, educate yourself, look at the, kind of the haters and the congratulators, so just looking at this, you guys are a resource and you're opening up all of the studies that you've done. And I think that's what's really interesting about it. Even listening to Elon's interview, at the end of last year, the New York Times, GFY, right?
Yeah, I was like,
sorry,
what are we gonna quote here?
Yeah, exactly. No, he was talking about all the patents that he has that are open. Some he protects and he creates some, but the other ones are mostly open source. So I think that's what the EV culture is all about, of sharing resources, because rising tide does lifts all ships. And, charging does keep the world going here in a little bit, as opposed to, again, the cost in barrels of fuel and oil and crude oil. And yeah.
Well, I mean, to that point of we've all been asking about the universal approach especially for the connector type, right? And if you rewind, still a year ago, there was still the drumbeat of Tesla's got to get their act together. They got to switch to CCS. They're the only company saying no. This sucks. And I always kept thinking, there is no way Elon and company at Tesla are going to give up their connector type. No way. Because anybody that uses it is like, man, this is an elegant design. You can tell this was designed with intent. You can tell it wasn't 8 people in a room going, we should take those DC pins and slap them on the bottom of that other thing and then make this thing. So I always thought, like, yeah, they're never going to do it. So the fact that everyone else decided, once you have a big player like Ford say, okay, we're making a switch, I think what was interesting about that moment is it still has shown, and if you kind of look at the landscape of the last year, and Torin and Emily, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is you look at where the legacy OEMs have kind of progressed to in their development. And last year is an example of they were just sourcing what they could from the SAE, saying, this is what's approved, this is what we've decided on as a coalition. And it just proved that it wasn't the right approach for various reasons. Namely being third-party networks couldn't support the OEMs the way that they'd hoped. And the way that Tesla went about it, just owning the whole ecosystem amidst having an elegant design, they just decided that's better for our drivers. And that's what we've now seen. I think it's great for the industry. I think people are going to really benefit from it. But Torin, to your point, we're going to have adapters in glove boxes and center consoles for a long time because we're not ripping out all that infrastructure. And a lot of those legacy cars, the millions of cars on the road that don't have that connector, are going to have to contend with that. I'd be curious to think, like, to get your thoughts on how that translates into kind of what we said about education and conversations earlier. Is dealers have to figure out if they get a trade-in on an older EV that doesn't have the current connector and they've got to sell that car, how do they do that?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a well thought out answer for that one, but I think dealers are in a good spot. Dealers are knowledgeable. They've been in the biz for a long time, and they've gone through changing technologies as well. They'll find innovative solutions for it. And you know what? They might have adapters available at the parts department at dealerships for different plugs, and they will find a way to continue being prosperous and getting people into the cars that they need.
And as you have like the EV market continue to mature, and so you do have more of these used EVs on the market, like that's really only good news because most Americans buy used cars. Like that's really a huge part of the market. And so having these vehicles that, okay, maybe you need an adapter, but that means this car is a little bit cheaper for you to afford. I think people are going to be really amenable to that. And just like some people coming in, like different cars have different specs. Like maybe it's 4-wheel drive. Maybe it doesn't have satellite radio. I don't know. But it will be one of those other things that you're just looking at when you're buying a used car, and you weigh and you look at your finances as like the average American family, and it'll just make EVs more affordable for people, I think.
In that way too, we often hear, that used EV is kind of like that for like, okay, we'll get a second car for the family, and we've got this other car we've had forever, but let's try out this other like this. We'll buy an EV and see what it's like. You still hear those stories of people that say, yeah, we bought our EV. Our first EV is kind of like, we'll just drive it around. No big deal. We'll still drive the car all the time. But then they realize, actually, as we just talked about earlier, with all those daily commutes and daily driving, if you do have a house where you can plug in, it changes the whole dynamic for how you can actually enjoy an EV. And then you see anecdotally people say like, yeah, my gas car is in the driveway and it hasn't moved in 3 months because we don't have to. It's that idea of if we can get those used EVs, into market, as we get those used EVs into market, I think it's going to introduce a lot more of those opportunities where it's someone who says, might as well try it. It's not going to cost me $40,000. I wasn't going to pay that anyway, but I can get one for 10, and what's that going to end up looking like? I think that as that happens more, how does that then roll into the programs and work that you're doing as it relates to workplace charging and helping people see like where these opportunities lie, and kind of understanding lifestyle? I just referenced someone who could charge at home, but someone who can't, is there a way to help them see that, oh, actually I street park, but actually I do have workplace charging. So, and I've got this, I don't know, old gas Suburban that I take to Idaho and go fishing with in the summers. But all the time I can just take this, X $1,000 older EV and do it. How do we tell that story to those folks that have a lifestyle that kind of aligns with the work you're doing with workplace charging, for example?
Absolutely. So our this certification we're working on, it's called eval. It's DOE funded. Fourth Mobility out of Oregon is running it, and cool. We're working with them on that. And really, the goal here is to recognize employers who have EV charging in the ground and incentivize and assist other employers who are interested in that. Okay. And the goal there is really tying into what you're saying of like making sure Americans have a designated place to charge, because 80% of EV charging happens at home or at work. Mm-hmm. And so if you have someone who's in multifamily housing or parks on the street or whatever it is, if they, start their job or looking for jobs and are like, hey, I have EV charging at work, that means I can get that used Chevy Bolt as our second vehicle. And so it just kind of opens up the world really for so many people if they can charge at work. And so again, with eval, that's what we're really trying to do, is create this platform to highlight employers who are already doing that and make it as easy as possible for other folks to follow suit.
Yeah. how do we go about helping, identify those people and help people understand kind of where they fit in the kind of EV ownership bucket, right? Is if you're a homeowner, you probably wouldn't think about this as much because you are going to, like you said, leverage your home charging. Is there a way to more effectively identify and how to market to those people that fit into that lifestyle demographic? I mean, is that part of what the eval program is?
The eval program is definitely built to recognize those businesses that are moving that greener direction, putting in workplace charging, incentivizing different forms of transportation for their workforce. Emily, help me out here.
Well, I was just saying like individual people, not so much the works, like the actual locations, but how do we help? Kind of we were talking about it earlier is, and as Jarod's like, I'm the big dumb ape walking in saying, I don't have a home charger. Help me do this. How do we help people that don't know what they don't know get exposed to that opportunity? Like you said, Emily, like they might be job hunting and they might want, like, how do we show them that that's a perk of that job and then translate that to average people?
Yeah, the biggest thing here, which I don't know how you really go about this from a systems approach, but is peer-to-peer contact. And so if you see that your neighbor got an EV or your cousin or your coworker, then that kind of starts the wheels turning. And so as you just get more EVs on the road, there will be kind of that interaction among networks that will allow people to see like, oh, I didn't think an EV was for me, but my coworker over here who lives in a similar house or apartment as I do and has the same job has this and really enjoys it and makes it work. Yeah. And so when people just see it in their daily lives, that's a huge part of it. There's also the component of seeing EVs in like media. So like, I don't know if you caught in the Barbie movie, the main
the electric Corvette.
America Ferrera, her character drives an EV. Yeah. And it's not a part of the plot. It's not like a huge thing, but it's there. And so as we put more EVs into the media that people consume every day, and as they see it in their daily lives, like that's how you reach people if you're talking about bridging that gap.
Yeah, there's again, just goes back to conditioning and what you know and that experience. And yeah, it's you guys, who is your ideal listener right now? Who do you want hearing this? Because, talking to, Matt and I talking about getting buses, that was a specific effort, right? E for electrification. He's like, screw California. I've lived there forever. I'm moving to, and he was just such a polarizing character. And he just has this relationship with EV or Tesla, for instance. And then he just like, well, he's out. And then, but he's excited about this. I say all that. Who do you ideally want to hear this podcast right now and is looking at electrificationcoalition.org and is looking at, I'm looking at these great case studies talking about going, you're talking about Iowa and, going Nissan Leaf and full fleet electrification. Who do you want to listen to this podcast and who do you want to share this with?
I would say, yeah, go ahead, Torin.
Yeah, we want everybody to hear it. We have all sorts of different services and information for all sorts of different municipalities, entities, companies, nonprofits. Obviously, Emily and I's work is focused on anybody who goes to work, which is a lot of us. A lot of people are going to the office now that COVID isn't really much of a thing anymore. We're all kind of getting back to the groove, getting back out into the world. And the more workplaces that are thinking about putting in charging can look at this programming, and really anybody can look into it. It doesn't have to be signed up for by the top person at the company. Really anybody within an organization can take a look at the certification process, take 20 minutes, give us an idea of what's going on as far as efforts towards green energy and EVs at work, and they can get certified and show the rest of the workforce that there are good opportunities at that place to work.
Does that fill it in, Emily, or is there?
Pretty much. I would also just add that this would be for people who are maybe open to an EV, but are hesitant because they're not sure how that charging piece is going to play out. And just providing that kind of framework for workplace charging, for saying you can leave the house and have a place to charge for where you spend 8 hours a day. And just kind of opening up that idea of like where you charge can be where you work.
Cool. One thing I'd like to know, and this is personal to both of you. is tomorrow you're told, okay, you're no longer working on workplace charging. That's not your program anymore. And now you get to choose in electrification what you want to work on tomorrow. What would each of you work on?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've worked on fleet electrification for the past couple of years, trying to get information to fleet operators on how they can go from a gas fleet to an electric fleet. There have been a lot of good instances of that. The city of Orlando has really kind of moved the needle. They've moved most of their gas cars that they can move to electric, and they've just gone that way, and it's worked out really, really well. And I would love to share that with all sorts of other fleets around the states that they can move that direction too. If they have the desire to, they can definitely implement that.
And I would say for me, it would be school bus electrification. Just because, yeah, you have the long-term climate impacts, but you also have the day-to-day pollution impacts for children. Yeah. When you see like the kids who are on school buses the longest often face the most other disadvantages and have the highest rates of asthma, and sitting on a diesel bus for 2 hours a day does not help. And so it's a pretty like simple, straightforward thing to address of like, we can swap this out for an electric school bus, and you don't have the exhaust, you don't have headaches from the noise, you don't have all these things, and you're helping kids. And I think that's fantastic.
And the drivers love them, and they're just portable batteries. There's so many pros.
There's a Vita X opportunity there for school buses that just chill and 100%. Hang out every night. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. Who was that guest that we had on previously? And they, again, this gets into the nuances of it, but they broke it down so easily for us about school buses.
Yeah, CARB or Center for Sustainable Energy. I forget who it was. It was yeah. But yeah, no, it was, but I mean, to those points is what you're looking at too for how you describe both those opportunities that you guys have both described is, Torin, for you, it's you have a model that you can point to and say, here's a livable case study, and here's what we've been able to effectively do. And in fleet, there's so much that comes down to the bean counting of it. And you can basically say, like, look, we can show you, like, aside from what it can do from an energy perspective, look what we can do for your bottom line if you make this decision. And it's marrying those conversations to kind of like see what's going to make someone react. And like you point on the school bus side of it, every single town, large and small throughout the country, that is something that can be implemented. And the beauty of it is, and the conversation we had on the previous podcast is, the routes of those buses. Like, exactly where they're going. You can do some quick math against what the battery can do, what the temperature is outside, to see how successful you can do that. And then have that, virtual backup facility of, we got X amount of kilowatt hour just hanging out at night if we need it. And yay, school buses. I mean, there's so many things that people just still don't know what they don't know. And the work that you're doing is exposing a lot of people in industry, regardless of where they are geographically, as to how that can benefit in their life. So, I mean, Emily, I was really hoping you were going to say, there's a lake that my family goes to in Idaho that I am like about to install a level 2 for them, like at their lodge. Cause I'm like, come on, guys. I went there one time with my car, and they literally let me use the manager's parking spot that had a 110 outlet. And I just plugged in and camped for 4 days and just was like, my car's filling up. I don't care. But I was like,
80, you got to 80 and tried to get home.
Well, but I rolled up and my uncle's like, how did you get here? I'm like, Uncle Bob, electricity's everywhere, baby. And he's just like, okay, let's go fishing.
Yeah, whatever, nerd, right? Yeah, but that's that stigma, and also, again, I'm just running through all this information on the website, and there's so much of it, and I'm just diving in here. The the CFI awards, and I mean 622 million awards for 47 projects in 24 states and territories. I mean, it's kind of like we live in a mid-century modern house, and so we got it deemed historic, not for the ego part of it, obviously, but we get the Mills Act. So our property tax gets cut in half because of we're investing into the home. So it's almost like paying it forward, like do and refine the infrastructure, and you will be acknowledged for being progressive and helping the planet, and also helping your bottom line. Why is electricity more efficient than fuel in more ways than one? Like you said, the school bus one is such a no-brainer, right? Those things sit there, boom, charging experience. I mean, and here in Southern California, it's a no-brainer. It just really is. But I say that because the funding does exist. So for those, I asked, it was kind of a loaded question. I think there's an opportunity for companies and cities to, as you say, Orlando, building that fleet, getting out there. We've seen hydrogen for so long, right? The natural gas and all these different natural gas vehicles around California. the funding's there.
Yeah, the funding's there. Like you said, CFI funding, the first round just went out very recently. There were several awardees, but there were so many more places that put a lot of thought and effort into their application, weren't awarded in the first round. So if any of those applicants are listening, apply for the second round again. And if you didn't apply for the first round, apply for the second round. And then also to that point again, where EVs make sense, total cost of ownership, like some EVs may be a little bit more expensive up front, but if you keep it for a couple years in a row, they make a lot of sense to keep on the long term. If there are fleets out there thinking about getting into it, EC's got a total cost of ownership tool called the Drive tool. Happy to walk through anybody that needs assistance with that too.
Wow. Yeah, I'm Matt. I'm just again reading all this information that
I was gonna say, I'm watching you over there. You're just kind of like,
no, it's cool.
You're gonna form an LLC and apply for one of these things and be like, Jerry, what are you doing? I got 17 EVs out there, baby. I got to charge them up and get them out for Turo or something.
I mean, clean school bus rebate program. Top takeaways. Yeah, I mean that one right there. Climate pollution reduction grant. Top 10 takeaways. This is, and we want people to take this little appetizer like a bloomin' onion and then go on and get that steak, and get Foster's doesn't even exist in Australia, but it does exist at Outback Steakhouse. This message brought to you. I'm joking.
I mean, I really do love is it pumpernickel, the dark brown loaf? It's got the
the brown bread.
Yeah.
Oh,
dude. Oh my God.
You don't even know the flavor. It's just brown bread.
Brown bread. No, seriously, it's like the brown bread. It's always warm. The butter's always soft, I can eat 9 of those.
What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's like,
but there are sufficient charging stations at Outback Steakhouse. Go on down and get yourself a bloomin' onion and a full charge. I appreciate your guys' insight. We're trying to have fun here and make it digestible for people such as me. Again, early adopters. Torin, Emily, put you on the spot. Are you fully charged? Are you EV? What's your weapon of choice as far as vehicles?
I will say, so we drive a 2017 Prius, and as soon as that thing goes out, we're putting a lot of miles on it. As soon as that's out, we're electric all the way.
What do you got your eyes on?
That's a gateway drug. That's a good one, though.
It is. Well, my partner is very excited about the Aptera, which is kind of a different take on what EVs can look like. I personally am more interested in a conventional looking EV, probably the Mach-E. I'm a fan of what Ford's been doing, and I hope they keep investing in the electric side of things for sure.
Sweet.
Nice. Torin, your weapon.
I haven't gone electric just yet. It is definitely on the front burner. It is definitely the next thing for me to get. If I had my choice, I think I'd probably hit up Travis Reeder and his team and see if I can get that Tesla-powered Camaro on the road or even back on the track again. That was so cool to see for a long time.
Is Torin low-key a drift fan? Dropping Von Kitten Jr. and the switch gear?
Not even low-key.
Okay. So were you like, I'm going to be on with Jarod DeAnda. That guy is a real piece of trash.
Yeah, where's this going?
But I am going to bother you when I see you again at Pouring the Drift Orlando coming up.
You got big Electrify Expo Orlando is coming up. That's where we're going to see you next.
That too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I'm amazed you weren't sitting sideways the whole time, like during the call.
Bad dad drift jokes. And 1, you're not a dad. 2, you're not a drifter, Matt. Stay in your lane.
I'm just trying to stay in here, Jarod. That's all I'm trying to do.
No, Torin, I appreciate your insight. And that brings up, we're wrapping up here, but motorsports, electric, I mean, nitro cross, I just had nitro cross up in Calgary. So talking about cold weather charging, we had that Chicago incident, and here we go. Here's another can of worms. But that's, again, you tapping into that emotion of motorsports or tapping into just that experience, remots, just a supercar that's electric and talking about Tesla. It's, again, just hitting the right notes. There are options, and it's not just a singular note. You don't have to just like elevator music. You can listen to heavy metal and drive an EV. You can listen to yacht rock and drive a Rivian truck, or, I don't know. I think that the stigma is like, that guy's a nerd or this or that. And you guys are helping the planet and really educating a lot of people. So I appreciate it. Matt, anything in closing?
No, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's been a lot of hard work done for a long time by certain organizations, and Electrification Coalition has been on the forefront of a lot of that. Partnering with organizations, as I mentioned, they're working with Fourth, which is Fourth Mobility is out of Portland, Oregon, here where I'm based. And it's so much work that goes on behind the scenes for what finally turns into a headline in whatever we see on social media or in the news. And good or bad, you have to take things in stride. And a lot of that is basically just taking it day by day for some of these things that take a while to transition. And with electrification, that is the conversation. This is not an overnight thing. And there's so much for people to unpack regardless of their lifestyle. But as they're exposed to programs like you've been discussing with, I mean, again, even that pie in the sky, what would you work on? Is it buses? Is it fleet? Or is it workplace charging? All those different things that you're working on play a role in just starting a conversation. And whether or not people are immediately going to engage on it is one thing, but that's where we're at as an industry is helping people understand how and where this fits in their life professionally or personally. And so credit to the work that you're doing at EC. And again, hopefully you guys can lock down the workplace charging thing and then move on to those programs. You're like, I want to work on that too. So hopefully it goes speedily. But in the meantime, again, congrats on the great work that you're doing. Thank you for coming on today to just, again, help people understand exactly what they might not know about the work you're doing. And obviously, Torin, Orlando, we'll see you at Expo, and Emily, we'll see you at a future Expo in future months.
Yep.
I'll meet you at that lake in Idaho. We can go fishing.
We can knock on the door of the lodge and be like, no, you seriously.
In our F-150, our Lightning. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. The switch gear, baby. Well, Emily, Torin, thank you so much. Matt, always a pleasure. Thank you for your bevy of knowledge and just damn handsome good looks.
I got the quaff. The quaff is like, it's coming in, man. I mean, it's silver foxy, but it's,
You're the most humble guy you know. Yep. No, it's good.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Emily. Torin, again, for more information, electrificationcoalition.org, where there is just, it's like a Harry Potter library full of resources all about electrification. Thanks for joining us here on Electrify News, Electrify Expo. Be sure to check out the website for when it's sliding or charging into your neighborhood. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to the Electrify podcast, brought to you by the creators of Electrify Expo. Be sure to catch full video episodes on YouTube at Electrify TV and follow along on social media for daily clips and more.